Welcome to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist by OnePitch. Are you curious how OnePitch can help you find relevant journalists to pitch, including some of the guests on this podcast? Head to our website at onepitch.co to learn more. Today's guest on the podcast is Brooke Masters. She is a U.S. financial editor and an associate editor at the Financial Times, where she leads a team of reporters covering financial services. During the episode, Brooke talks about how coverage is broken down across the teams at FT, how sources should be pitched effectively, when is the best time to pitch her, and more. Let's hear from Brooke now.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Beck Bamberger. With us today on Coffee with the Journalist, and by the way, I'm having a real coffee in a real cafe. So exciting, is Brooke Masters. She's the U.S. financial editor over at FT. That's Financial Times. If you're not familiar, we'll talk a little bit about what FT all covers. But welcome, Brooke. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Brooke, you've been there a long time, 16 plus years and counting, now editing everything as it relates to the U.S. Brooke, first question, since you've been at the FT 16 years, what is the secret to staying at a news organization that long, besides doing a kick-ass job?
Changing jobs regularly so you don't get bored.
There you go.
I've done a lot of different things at the FT, everything from, being a regulation correspondent to running the companies section to running op-eds and opinion. And now I am U.S. financial editor in New York, where I kind of run all of our financial coverage. I report myself and write columns and news stories, but I also sort of run traffic for our larger team and help shape the coverage.
Wonderful. And do you get tons of pitches still?
Oh, God, yes. It's not as bad as when I ran opinion, where I got like 250 a day. But I get a good, solid, big group. People pitching everything from, here's my market commentator that I want you to quote to, here's our new fabulous product launch of, XYZ purple spotted ETF to actual news stories that I want to cover, such as, do you realize this Fed proposal is going to make banks uneconomic?
Ah, okay. And since you are editor, and we were talking about this before we got on, you sometimes play traffic control, and then of course you're writing your own stuff. How do you do the traffic control and fling stuff to people who might be interested versus, that's a piece I'm perhaps going to do myself?
My personal interest is largely focused on the asset managers, the biggest ones, particularly BlackRock and its sort of competitors. But I help the banking team with some reporting, and then I also send things out to markets and the banking team and the asset management reporters. I tend to think about if it's clearly about an institution, other than say BlackRock, which is mine, I will send it to whichever reporter covers that institution or sector. If it's more a thought about, here's my market commentator, or, we have a view that value is in focus, that's a very markets thing. So I'll send it to the markets team. And often what I would just do is respond and say, lovely of you to get in touch with me. Actually, you need to talk to Jennifer Hughes, who was the U.S. markets editor.
Wow. Do you actually do that consistently, as in a response, and you tell them who they should go to?
If I think it's an interesting pitch, but I don't want to write it, yes. If it's dull, I ignore it.
Yeah, you just ignore. Okay. Now, for those you ignore, are you a mass deleter? Do you look at every email? Do you file? What do you do to keep your inbox kind of sane?
I am not a mass deleter. I tend to leave most things in my inbox because you never know whether 6 months from now I will think, wait, didn't I have a pitch about mushroom soup?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I tend to leave it where I can get it. And because Gmail fits infinite amounts of stuff.
Exactly.
People who annoy me, I do tend to delete more. And particularly people, like everybody, I have pet peeves, and I really hate people who pitch, like, you wrote a story on this issue today. Here is my pitch about the same issue with not even a new angle. That's what really drives me up the wall. Unless the person they're pitching is interesting, I kind of think this is somebody who doesn't understand the game. I'm not particularly excited.
I never understood that. I don't know. And it seems like a disease amongst PR people. Do you get it, by the way, from PR people, or do you get it from random contributor expert? Like, where does it come from?
Oh, it's definitely the PR people. Almost never you get a random contributor. Like, I will get emails from XYZ professors saying, I saw you wrote about this subject that I do spend my life researching. Generally, then they will say, I think you're wrong or right about this. And so it's a comment. I read your piece, and here's my thoughts. And so you know that I'm a genius, and therefore you should have quoted me.
Yes.
But it's much more nicer. No, the PR ones are like, you wrote that everyone's going to be buying bonds. Here's a guy saying everyone's going to be buying bonds. It's like, no.
Yes, because that's exactly what I did. Why do you think people do that, by the way? Pressure, or they have a standard pitch and they don't have the time, or they don't give themselves the time to say, okay, this woman clearly does cover the subject that I'm trying to pitch at, but I need to change it. I mean, the worst are the ones you get like a week later saying, some reporters are saying, and you're like, I said that was me. That was me. Yeah. Oh God. No. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that this disease is still going. What's a bad pitch to you besides obviously the one you just gave, Brooke? Is there like one that just also grates you?
I think the ones that really state the obvious. Will rates go up or down? Like, I know that is the question, but have an angle. Also anything that's 500, 700, 800 words where you can't tell what the heck they're talking about. If I can't figure out what you're talking about in the first 2 paragraphs and the paragraphs are short, I probably am not going to keep reading. I mean, I think length is a big problem.
Yeah. Do you prefer then bullet points for your pitches?
Bullet points help. I mean, sometimes I cover a lot of legal issues which don't lend themselves to bullet points. I don't think, I'd rather also ones that don't actually, that are so vague, they don't make a point. Like, I have a legal expert on the subject of money laundering. Well, that's nice. Okay, what's your point? And so I would rather have a sentence saying, this is the point we're making about money laundering that you should talk to them about. It should be short. It doesn't have to be bullet points. And it should be very clear who it is you're pitching, what their point is, and why I should be interested in that person's view. Because that's the other thing is like, I have a legal expert. Well, that's nice you have a legal expert, but why is he a legal expert? He's written 7 books about this, or, he used to trade these securities. Why is he your expert?
Yeah, I find that odd at times when people, here's the expert, but not even 5 words describe, well, who? Oh, MIT professor, 20 years, or something. Like, what's the hook to that person being an expert? Because unfortunately, everyone seems like an expert these days.
Or everyone thinks they're an expert these days.
Or thinks they're even worse. Exactly. Okay, if you were to have 3 elements of a pitch, Brooke, that you're like, yes, this works for me, what would those elements be?
A news angle, like this newsy thing is happening, or the scandal that we're uncovering. So definitely news. Here's the person I have that you want to talk to and why. And I guess the third thing is a sense that you actually know who I am and are not just sending this to 17 papers. I'm going to wake up in the morning and find the same guy quoted in the Wall Street Journal because you at the same time. That helps. Oh, here's another of my pet peeves where I get these. I'd like to introduce you to Joe Schmo. And I'm like, Joe Schmo and I had coffee last week. Did you ask Joe Schmo?
Oh, no.
It happens to me all the time. Oh, it happens all the time. Particularly, it's less bad now, but when I was a regulation reporter, I had been doing it a really long time. I knew most people in the sector, but I would get these particularly these are legal PRs, like, you need to meet our partner at, Gibson Dunn, and he's the world's greatest expert on such and such. And I was like, yeah, I know. I mean, I actually took to telling people, like, do you realize your PR is trying to introduce you to me? And they would generally, I discovered they would often change PR firms after that.
Yes, I would imagine they would from that. Oh, God. Wow. Okay. So those are in the not what to do camp significantly. Do you have anything where you're like, oh, when I see this, I am just kissing the sky? I love a pitch like this.
Not so. It's hard to describe perfect. I also think as a reporter, it's more complicated. Like when I was running op-ed, it was much easier to say, like, if you're pitching an opinion piece, there you need to say, this is the point we're going to be making. This is why the person did it. And those, there's kind of a format. And if you do those right, it really is wonderful. And my successor, Alice Fishburne, as the opinion editor, would tell you that those are great. And also you attach, if there's a draft already, you attach the draft so they have a chance to look at it. For news, I think it's harder because particularly I would say the FT, for those of you who don't know, we've got 1.1 paying subscribers now, 1 million paying subscribers. We're high end, we're global. stories that work really well for an American audience only sometimes work for us because, our audience is really split and really and has a different perspective. So I think for us, a pitch to an FT reporter if it's about, presumably we're mostly about Americans. If it's about America, it's helpful to say that this is important to the industries that you guys care most about, which are like tech, energy, and finance. Mm-hmm. Or it travels to Hong Kong because it's similar to something happening in Hong Kong. A recognition that we don't necessarily cover exactly the same thing as everybody else.
Yes. Okay. So acknowledgement of understanding the beats and the global reach that you all have. Yeah. Well, that's good. Okay.
Today's interview will continue after this brief message brought to you by OnePitch. Are you curious to see the unique ways OnePitch helps PR professionals and marketers pitch journalists? Head to onepitch.co to learn about our new OnePitch score and see how easy it is to find the right journalist to pitch your news to. Sign up for your free account today. Now, back to today's episode.
Brooke, it sounds like you go to coffees and lunch and things as such. Is that how you like to be courted or to build a relationship with you if someone does not have one?
I have to confess that I actually tend to reserve my coffees and lunches for either CEOs, who I definitely need to know, or people I already know and like. It's a long time. I actually am much more likely to develop a relationship with someone through repeated contact in emails and phone calls around stories, and then think, wow, this person actually is somebody who suggests this.
Yes, has merit for me.
One twist on that is like if you're pitching someone that you want to bring into the FT, particularly if it's someone whose ideas and position cross a bunch of different beats, like, it's somebody who does alternatives and therefore the asset management person wants them, the private equity person wants them, and the person who covers credit wants them. Then you sort of group things where somebody comes in for an hour and talks to all of us. Somebody pitching for that I've got a really interesting person who might cross beats and like to meet a whole bunch of people on your team. Those people, if they sound really interesting, I like those, and particularly if they're willing to come to the FT so that we can with a lot of people.
That's like a power pitch.
Yeah, it's a power pitch. It works really well, actually. What have we had recently? We had the Managed Funds Association, which is they represented the alternative industry. They brought in their CEO and their chief lobbyist person to talk to all of us about these issues. So the people doing market structure could come, and my asset management folks could come, and the guys who were really interested in PE could come. And so that was really smart. That worked. We got probably 7 people to come listen to them. We all have a little bit we want to ask about.
Yes. Wow.
Or like the Australian super pension came in, and they're interesting because they're expanding here, and also they're a gigantic investor. So again, the people who do real estate were interested because they're big investors there, and the people who are just interested in government policy on pensions came, and that sort of thing. So those, particularly if you have someone who crosses a number of different beats, we're interested in bringing people in and saving us a bunch of time so everyone meets them at once and everybody interesting.
Oh, that's the element of a power pitch, though. I'm coming to you. Gather round. Gather round.
Exactly. The people you bring, I think the one thing is if they're really dead, dull, boring, and you've got 5 people around, you've just killed yourself with 5 people.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
The clients you choose to bring.
It's a power. Precarious pitch. Yes. Oh, fascinating. Okay. I haven't heard that before, by the way. No one's said gather around and come in person. Okay. This is good insight.
Well, I think one reason probably we do that more is we're a much smaller operation in the U.S. than many of our peers. And as a result, if you look at FT story, we often will have 4 bylines on it because everybody just throws something in because we've all got a little touch. We don't throw elbows the way other places do. I'm not sure that would work as well at other places where the JP Morgan reporter and the Bank of America reporter don't talk to each other. In our shop, it's the same person, and he's talking all the time to the Goldman Sachs reporter.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Oh, but I've never heard this, and I love it. What about for you, Brooke, exclusives or embargoes? Do you want either, any, and how?
Yeah, I think we are interested in exclusives and embargoes. We don't tend to do purely promotional ones like product launches. We're very interested in on-the-record interviews that may generate a news story of our choice. Like those kinds of exclusive interviews, because often things that are really interesting to our readers are not necessarily what the PR is going to guess, because our readers are a little different. So, your head of hedge fund comes in and we end up being excited about something. So those we like. We definitely work with people under embargo. I think to do that, the deal guys, which is our due diligence team, they obviously do some drops. We do worry a bit about being offered an embargo where something that is clearly going to be controversial and going to be criticized, that we are too limited in what we can do in order to write a fairly rounded story. And so we are interested, but if you are pitching something that is clearly like a bunch of people are going to really, really hate, we will probably want to discuss how we can do it.
Yeah,
we used to do this with banking regulations. Like when the SEC, not so much, the SEC has a very good way of organizing this. If somebody's coming to us with a new proposed rule that's about to be, we will talk like, have you already done, like in the UK, for example, they'll run a bunch of proposals by a select group of industry people they trust so that they also know what the criticisms are going to be. And so we will sometimes say like, okay, we will write this, and then who already knows about it? So we can go get their views. So working some way like that helps.
Okay. Lastly, Brooke, we have this little fun, quick fire little question thing going on here. And I just want to hear your yes or no or the preference if I tee it up. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Here we go. Video or phone interview?
That's tough. I think these days more video.
Okay. Bullet points or paragraphs?
Bullet points.
Short or long pitches?
Short.
Images attached or a Dropbox zip file?
As long as it's not too many images attached.
Me too. I like that much better. Pitches in the morning or at night, or who cares?
Not first thing in the morning, because if you imagine our bosses are in Europe, we wake up to 5 hours worth of emails. Anything that comes in before 10, it's through the way I'm wading through it. I'm much more likely to read something that comes in between, say, 11 and 5.
ET time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is good. Okay. Email or Twitter DM?
Email.
Direct or creative subject lines?
Direct.
Press release or media kit?
Press release.
Lastly, Brooke, is there anything you want to promote or talk about in terms of hyping and elevating your work?
That's tough. Well, I suppose the thing I care most about of what I do is my column, which is every other week on a Wednesday online and in a Thursday paper. And it's although I'm the financial editor, it's broader. It's business more generally. If you were going to read one thing I write, that's the thing I sweat over.
Okay. Now, how can people sign up for that easily if they're not seeing it?
If you're on FT.com, there is a thing called MyFT where you can follow an author. Probably the easiest thing to do is follow me as an author. When you see the things, they actually are color-coded. The ones that have my name, the one that have my name and head on it is a column, and the one that doesn't have my head on it is a news story. And so if you want to skip through and only do the columns, you look for the heads.
Look for the heads. All right, Miss Brooke. Thank you so much for being on. I love the ad of come in person, power pitch it, but don't mess it up. Very critical.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brooke. Appreciate it. And cheers from New York.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Coffee with the Journalist episode featuring Brooke Masters at Financial Times. For more exclusive insights about the journalists on this podcast, subscribe to our weekly podcast newsletter at onepitch.co/podcast. We'll see you next week with even more insights about the journalists you want to learn more about. Until then, start great stories.